Welcome, low ego action heroes. This is Debbie Levitt from DeltaCX.com. We're a full service CX and UX agency, and welcome to episode 139, shifting away from the lean startup book and pretty much everything that's in it. I forgot to test my effects, so let's see if I can turn these on. No. What network am I on? Always a good question. So I will work on getting my effects working. And meanwhile, let's take a moment to thank the people who have generously donated to the channel. Let's put that graphic up. Give me a moment. So thanks to everybody who has financially supported the channel. Right now, our mid-level and high-level low-ego action heroes are Anita, Chang, Darren, Ican, Irena, Ivy, Jordan, Michelle, Nikki, Ralitza, Ray, Solomon, and of course, seniors, Farmcat, and Mix Betty. Thanks to everybody who is supporting the channel. Totally optional, but always appreciated. And meanwhile, I do not have my stuff open yet, but we are going to be reading my Medium article about the lean startup, and we'll turn that into a conversation. So if you have any comments, questions, disagreements, please feel free to put them in the chat. Okay, effects are working. Please feel free to put them in the chat while I am reading. If you are listening to this later, please put comments under the YouTube video. I always answer all comments personally. So happy to hear your thoughts on these things. So let me flip over to my article and we'll give it a read, and we will see what people say about it. So let's see. Let's push the button that shares my screen. Alrighty, so you should see, yes, my screen, the tip jar, me, the chat room, the Medium article. So here we go. So this article is from December 2021, and it's called "The Lean Startup is Outdated, Drop Everything That Comes From It." And I wrote, "The Lean Startup was published in 2021 and introduced or popularized a lot of what is used in tech today, even in non-lean and non-startup environments. And it's time we stopped reading it. Stop reading it. Stop following it. Stop doing what it recommends. It's outdated, and there's a 99% chance it wasn't written for the type of company you work at." Now, before I continue, let me quickly say I had a couple of people comment under the article that the ideas in the lean startup didn't necessarily come from the lean startup and they came from someone before. That's fine. That's why I use the word popularized. So, there we go. So even if you want to imagine that the lean startup book is great for startups, most startups are trying to follow the lean startup book, right? And depending upon whose numbers you believe, 90 to 95% of startups are failing. Some statistics I've seen show that around 30% of startups are failing due to poor product market fit. I would think it's higher, but those are the statistics that I found online. At best, the lean startup approach has a very low success rate. We need to consider that the lean startup was almost okay for its time, roughly 2010, and now we have enough years of trying it to say that it doesn't work well enough, often enough, or consistently. I'm just going to go into YouTube to check the chat room because I'm not seeing. Hey, 5 people are live. Hey, hi. My chat room here doesn't seem to be working. I'll try refreshing it. All right. So sorry, continuing with the article. Also, why would non-startups want to emulate startups, especially when startups have like a 90-ish% rate of total failure, going out of business, nobody wanted this product or service? Let's not emulate that model. Let's break down the lean startup and why it's time to think critically and retire it. Hey, Tango. So let's talk about the context for the book. What is the history of this book? Now, I was there. Oh, hi, Udipta. In the early 2000s, we had the famous dot-com bubble. And if you weren't there, Google it, where lots of highly valued new tech companies went splat. Some companies had no business model or unrealistic business models. I remember hearing that we didn't need to worry about profit because we'll make it up in volume. What? Companies with crappy ideas and sometimes total vaporware were getting venture capital funding. Vaporware is software or hardware that has been advertised or marketed but was never completed, released, or publicly available. Like Kickstarters that you backed but you never got anything. Vaporware. Thanks to the bubble bursting, by the end of 2002, $5 trillion American was lost from the stock market. The NASDAQ was down 78%. By the end of 2004, roughly half of dot-com companies had gone out of business. Around this time, the main messages in startup land were to find amazing developers. The most important thing you could do was to have a cool idea and a great development team. In 2008, Eric Ries, I think that's how he pronounces that, who later published the Lean Startup book in 2011, started proposing this methodology. He wanted to improve upon what had been going on with startups and tech companies. He was also inspired by his own company failing, which according to Wikipedia was due to Ries and his colleagues not understanding the wants of their target customers and because they focused too much time and energy on the initial product launch. You're probably yelling, yes, this is why we need CX and UX practitioners on teams. We identify and mitigate risk. We help with product market fit. We research and understand target customers' needs, wants, tasks, etc. Ries could have written a one-sentence book that said, hire great CX and UX professionals and let them do their things. But he went in another direction. The Lean Startup book. I remember reading the book around when it came out. I had a startup in Silicon Valley, and it was required reading at the incubator. I remember thinking a few main things at the time. 1, he's telling people to talk to customers, but he's not clear about what good or bad questions are. I think a lot of startups will ask the wrong questions, validate bad ideas, and continue with bad ideas. 2, the emphasis appears to be on just ship it so you're not vaporware. Release something so that potential investors can see you release real product rather than just having ideas or making promises. Just get it out there and fix it later. That might be cool for startups still looking for their first investor, but does that make sense for the product, services, or systems at any other type of company? 3, since UX isn't involved, we're going to learn late in the game after building or releasing software if people like it or not. And if we didn't research well, we might also not be great at finding out later what's working and what's not. It seems like a cycle that's doomed while being self-validating. Lean as do the least you can to get to the next step doesn't match the definition of lean that Toyota created. Ries's lean seems like go as fast as you can to release something so investors take you seriously. Traditional lean is about reducing defects, improving quality, increasing customer satisfaction, and getting more right the first time. That should say the first time. That runs against the MVP and cycles of guesses. The main messages in startup land had changed. We were being told that great developers were easy to find. You can go local, or you can hire great teams from India and Eastern Europe. The real challenge for startups was now UX, product market fit, the right idea, and the right execution of that idea. In 2015, Derek, I don't know how to pronounce his last name, Sivers, I'm sorry, I don't know. Derek's Anything You Want book drove this home. It's about the execution of the idea, not the idea. Get the execution wrong, and what do you really have? So the message was changing from find an amazing dev team and you're golden to how will you execute on this idea? And you probably need amazing UX people to work on this. Unsurprisingly, UX boot camps started exploding because demand was so high. Bizarrely, the Lean Startup's principles are probably in use at your company right now. The Lean Startup is outdated and was meant for startups in a post-dot-com bubble world, but you'll recognize many of its principles. A build, measure, learn cycle, or sometimes shown as ideas, build, product, measure, data, learn. Notice that learn isn't first. We're just going to start with ideas or building, which has led us to feature-oriented approaches. Teams are feature factories running with ideas and guesses, thinking that's fast. Is it still fast if we're building the wrong idea or execution of that idea? How about we switch to CX research, then CX architecture design and prototyping, then CX testing, then CX iteration, then have engineering build it and have it go live. The MVP, minimum viable product. Rather than taking a lot of time to release a full version 1.0, the Lean Startup book suggests that you start with publicly releasing pieces of your idea so you can see how users respond. Sounds good on paper, but it's wasteful and risky. If you have the wrong idea or a poor execution of a good idea, you spent time and money releasing it to the public. Everybody has seen it, and some people struggled with it. Customer support had to help people. Sales watched some people jump ship. And what if customers don't want pieces or slices of your idea? What if that doesn't serve their needs? Users don't want minimally viable anything. Actionable metrics versus vanity metrics. I remember the early 2010s. Investors wanted to see traction and adoption, meaning metrics showing people were signing up and using your product, even if it were still free. These didn't seem actionable to me, and they seemed too easily manipulated. Congratulations on X minutes in your app, or Y new downloads this month. Is anybody really using this thing? Are they paying for it? Metrics often can't tell us where or how our product is going right or wrong, which means they're only actionable if you take action to add qualitative research and fill in the blanks. Lots of A/B testing. Too many people today think that you can A/B test your way to a good product. Not meeting your metrics goals? Try moving that button. Make the text bigger. Push the value proposition more. Keep trying slight variations and chase the ones that achieve business goals. User and customer goals are rarely considered. Pivot, meaning that you slightly or completely change your product based on feedback or how badly goal achievement, aka metrics, is or are going. Nowadays, we also hear this from Agile. We should change requirements and the product even late in the game if we learn it's not right for customers. Yet our teams rarely do this, so the pivot advice could be good, but it's rarely taken. If you're not a startup in the early 2010s, the Lean Startup's principles are probably very wrong for your teams. Technology moves fast. Some books get outdated fast. Some books are timeless. And of course, I'm linking there to The Design of Everyday Things. It's time for us to drop the Lean Startup and what has come from it, especially MVPs, A/B testing our way to achieving business goals, often at the expense of the customer experience, and starting with ideas and features rather than starting with research, knowledge, and learning. Bonus! It's also time to throw away all editions of the Lean UX book. Lean UX is neither lean nor UX. I have hours of videos on the YouTube channel here about why it's garbage and why most UX professionals rejected it. And I link to my videos talking about that. You can always go to YouTube and search for Delta CX Lean UX and watch some of those videos. In addition to a long list of evils, Lean UX was first published in early 2013 and picked up where the Lean Startup leaves off. Lean UX assumes you're doing MVPs, speed is more important than quality, and guesses and assumptions are okay. We'll learn after we ship if anybody likes our ideas. Build, measure, learn. Lean UX borrows heavily from the Lean Canvas, which was a 2010 adaptation by Ash Moria, I might be pronouncing that wrong, of the business model canvas. This is why you see a one-page template trying to rush through what might be user problems and how we will solve them. It was originally a business model canvas, but our CX and UX teams are rarely deciding or changing the business model. So on the screen, I'm showing the original Lean Canvas, which was the variation of the business model canvas, and it says problem, solution, key metrics, value proposition, unfair advantage, channels, customer segments, cost structure, and revenue streams. This can make sense if you are, so what I wrote here was list problems, come up with solutions, what's the value proposition, and how will we make money? Seems a bit hasty, and hopefully we're correctly understanding customers and their problems, but there you go. Then I show you the Lean UX Canvas version 2. Version 2 of the Lean UX Canvas starts with business problem, not users' problems, desired business outcomes, not desired user outcomes, come up with solutions before you've made hypotheses. Hypotheses come before what's the most important thing we need to learn first, which you would think is first, but is seventh, and lands on what's the least amount of work we can do to learn important things. It sounds all wrong because it is all wrong. It's a sad, multidimensional festival of assumptions feeding other assumptions. Shifting away from 2008 startup methodology might be scary, but we must do it. 2008, crawling out of the dot-com bubble having burst, the Pussycat Dolls and Flo Rida topped the Billboard charts, and Beyoncé had some advice for all the single ladies. Remember when Quantum of Solace, Kung Fu Panda, and Iron Man were in the theaters? CNET said the BlackBerry Bold was one of the best smartphones of the year. 2008, when Reese started creating his lean startup methodology, never made a second edition of his 2011 book. Tech and best practices have passed this one by. This book made sense given the context of startup and tech carnage in the early 2000s, but now we're decades past that. We know now that the MVP sounds cool, but isn't customer-centric. Potential, trial, and paying customers don't want something that's barely viable, some slice of what you guess and hope they might like. They want to be known, heard, understood, and catered to. That's what you want as a customer. Why aren't you delivering that to your own users? Let's say it out loud. The lean startup is dead. The MVP is dead. Fake lean is dead. Customer centricity is all you have. Vanity metrics, A/B testing, and just ship it aren't customer centric at all. It's time to transform towards customer centricity. If people wouldn't open their wallets for this and give it 5 stars out of 5, it's not ready for the public. But Deb, CX and UX are for startups with money to burn or waste, said one guy in a response to this article. If you see CX and UX as money wasted, you don't understand CX and UX, you're doing CX and UX wrong, or both. You can burn time, money, investor confidence, and customer goodwill by releasing cycles of guesses. How come nobody ever does the cost-benefit analysis on that? Why do we still praise startups for cycles of guesses? Or you can spend time and money upfront on having experts, freelancers, staff, an outside agency, do the right research correctly to help you know if you're going in the right direction. Be truly lean by reducing waste, defects, and lack of customer value. Lean, real lean, says that value is decided by customers. And if you didn't deliver customer value the first time, that's lean waste you should have cut. So there's nothing lean about cycles of guesses. Real lean would tell you to cut fake lean for being wasteful. And then I edited the article and I added this later. What should we do instead? Someone commented under this article that I missed the point of my own article. And I didn't say enough about what to do instead. I have a 191,000 word book on what to do instead, so short answers here might not satisfy the person who wrote that comment. And the point of my article was to get people thinking critically about the lean startup so they can start to let go of a poor model. So I think I hit my own article's point. Thank you, random guy. But here's a list of some things that we can do instead. Number 1, hire a highly qualified CX and UX team and give them budget and time to do their best work. If you're a startup, hire one senior level or higher and let them do their best work. We are all about business intelligence, customer intelligence, risk identification, and mitigation for companies and teams of all sizes. 2, switch to CX research, then CX architecture, design, and prototyping, then CX testing, then CX iteration, then have engineering build it and go live. Number 3 thing you can do instead? Switch from being feature-oriented to task-oriented. Instead of starting with the idea, start with research. You might learn that the problem you wanted to solve isn't really a problem. You might learn that your intended audience isn't the right audience. Number 4, remember that fast doesn't mean right or market dominating or innovative or disruptive or even headed in the right direction. The companies you admire most spend the most time and money on R&D, research and development. Stop trying to skimp on research to rush something out. The winner often isn't the one who was first to market. Look up what lean was originally about. The lean startup redefined lean and made it into something it wasn't meant to be. Check out Lean Six Sigma. Lean is about reducing internal and external waste. Waste in our internal processes, like guessing what people want and rebuilding it, or cycles of MVPs. And waste for our customers, crappy products, bad service, difficult workflows, etc. Fake lean should be cut for its waste. Real lean is something to learn about and take the best from. And finally, number 6 of what we can do instead, customer centricity. Business strategies, goals, initiatives, and priorities are crafted around potential and current customers, users, partners, whoever they might be. How to be more customer-centric deserves its own article or book. And let's flip back to a giant picture of me. That is the article. It looks like I have a few spelling mistakes to fix. Thanks for everybody's patience with that. Somehow it's still got 700 claps, even with a few spelling mistakes. We've got a couple of comments in the chat room, but I would love to hear comments, questions, disagreements, fighting, whatever you want to add. Brian says, if you start with a pile of crap and A/B test it, you end up with 2 piles of crap. I think that's a great point. Very often your B is a variation of your A. If A wasn't the right thing to go with, then why are we making an incremental change to the wrong thing? Fantastic point, Brian. Thank you so much. Confetti for you. Dr. Giles is here. Good to see him. And he says, clicks fingers like he's at a poetry show. Yeah, thank you. Snap along with this beat poetry I've got working here. Another thing I want to mention, which I'm working on writing something about, is some of the people who responded to the article, and I got many positive responses, but some of the people who responded and were a little bit like, hey, I don't know about this. They thought the lean startup was a good idea because how the heck are you ever going to figure out what to build when you don't have a product yet? Like, sure, UX is great when you have a product and you can do your cycles of testing and research and things like that. But these people thought, well, if you don't have a product yet, you can't do UX. And I know many of us at our jobs hear that a lot. We hear, well, we don't have the product yet. We're still coming up with ideas or disruptions or innovations or brainstorms. How the heck can we do a UX process when we don't have the thing. And I try to explain to people that the UX process, user-centered design, is absolutely designed to find what the thing should be. That's the whole thing. That's why I always say we are problem finders before we are problem solvers. And I give people examples that some of you know the persona I usually show when I'm showing examples of personas was a real one that I did many years ago, and she's called Community Carrie. You might have seen her if you watch the show. She pops up sometimes. And Community Carrie came from a project I did, I think, in 2014, and she was for a Parkinson's disease foundation. And they wanted us to research interviewing Parkinson's patients who were all roughly the same age and all had Parkinson's for roughly the same amount of time. And they wanted to know how they use fitness wearables and if they were active on social media related to talking about their Parkinson's disease progress. So we wrote up a protocol and we interviewed people that the foundation found for us to meet. And we ended up dividing them into 3 personas. One of them was Community Carrie. And we also talked to them because this was all because the foundation was wondering, is there an app that the foundation should create? Is there kind of an obvious thing here that these Parkinson's patients would want or use or need, an unmet need, an opportunity? So the whole point of our research was to determine the insights and the opportunities and the unmet need. And what we found was that the pretty much across the board for at least our 2 more active exercise-loving personas, what they imagined an app could do for them, and this was 2014, was they imagined an app that would aggregate all of their health data, their sleep, their nutrition, their mood, their blood pressure, their sugar levels, their how much exercise they did that day, what kind of exercise they did that day, how they felt before the exercise, how they felt after the exercise. They expected the app to track, did I mention sleep, how well they slept. So they imagined this app that would aggregate all of this stuff. And you might think, well, okay, Deb, it's 2022. We kind of have that now. Many smart watches do that. The Apple Watch tracks a lot of that. The TicWatch tracks a lot of that. Though you'd have to put into an app what you ate. Your watch doesn't know that yet. You'd have to put into an app, how much water did I drink, or how much, what food did I eat and how much, and you'd have to put in your mood and some other readings. So we're still not there yet. But the interesting thing about this was that wasn't where this ended. These target audiences imagined that this app would then proactively recommend health suggestions to them. Is there something they could do today to make their day with Parkinson's a little bit better? They expected the app to know their calendar schedule, know their exercise preferences, and make suggestions to them. Hey, you've got 2 hours until your next appointment. You love gardening. It's 62 degrees where you live, 62 Fahrenheit, 16 Celsius. Why don't you go out and do a half hour of gardening? And they also imagined that the app would proactively send information to their doctor so that if their doctor had any recommendations, the doctor could recommend those. Now, you can imagine that this is a huge undertaking, but maybe your first thought is, that sounds great. That does sound like a really optimum health app, not just for people with Parkinson's, but it could be people with cancer, people with heart disease. You could see how that could make sense for people with a lot of different conditions. And again, we are seeing this more and more in clinical UX and the healthcare space because we do see that there are some home versions of medical equipment that can now read your blood pressure or kind of a mini heart rate thing and put it into an app, maybe get that to your doctor. But imagine this app that had everything and then had your, some sort of AI making recommendations, getting it to your doctor so your doctor can send back recommendations. That was really the unmet need. That was the opportunity. And it didn't sound like they were going to want an MVP of that. Let's go to the chat room for a moment. Dr. Giles says, UX professionals are trained to find solutions to problems or at least improve the current experiences people have, for sure. He also said an MVP should be a product used to test an idea for a particular product or service with low cost and effort, like a sign-up page to gauge interest. This validates a business proposition before investment. Yes and no. I tend to disagree with that only because just because people signed up to a sign-up page doesn't mean that they are actually interested in a product they can't see or try or price. So that's a very common thing done with startups, which is like create the sign-up page, see if there's even any interest in people being on your waiting list or your mailing list. And that's supposed to be a vanity metric representing some sort of interest in your idea or semi-validation of your idea, but I do disagree with it. Hypothetically, people could sign up for that, your landing page or your mailing list, and then when your product comes out, go, oh, this isn't what I wanted at all. This is crap. Never mind. So thinking about that Parkinson's Foundation project, I think it's important to think about, first of all, how CX and UX can research target audiences even without a hypothesis. We didn't go in with a hypothesis of we think Parkinson's people need this. We just went in with more generative, exploratory type of research, just saying, who are these people? What are they doing now? What could be improved? What do they wish happened for their own disease progress and monitoring? And that helped us find the unmet need. Though it turned out that the unmet need, while certainly a cool sounding app, that I think technology is not ready for yet. It would require a lot of manual work for them to enter in their with the food they ate and how much of it, and the water they drank and how much of it, and their mood changing throughout the day, and their energy levels and things like that, because a smartwatch can read some stuff, but it can't read that. Dr. Giles says, I agree with you that MVPs like a sign-up page can be useless, but it can be useful if it emphasizes that there is no interest. I don't see a sign-up page as an MVP. Remember, an MVP hypothetically is minimum viable product. So that would mean you would have to release a product with some features or functions. At least in the startup world in Silicon Valley that I existed in, your sign-up page is not an MVP because it is not a viable product. It is only a measure of potentially interested people and a way for you to capture those interested people while you come up with that early product. Dr. Giles says MVPs don't have to be a sign-up page. Bruce says, thank you for making your perspective on this more visible. We definitely need more voices like yours in the UX and CX leadership community. MVP in essence might not be problematic, but where do you draw the line? Thank you, Bruce. I certainly agree. I think it's all about critical thinking. We can say, well, what is minimally viable? Like you said, what is minimally viable or what's minimally lovable? And you'll find that what UX thinks that is different from what product thinks that is different from what engineering thinks that is. And to me, that's something that we should be shepherding, because if the question is, what will the customer find valuable, whether that's minimally valuable or somewhat valuable or passably valuable, I don't think we need adverbs here. If whatever the customer will find valuable is normally shepherded by CX and UX through our research and our usability testing and other ways that we determine and measure these things. And I think that MVPs and the like go wrong when they get away from the voice and the reality of the customer, and someone in engineering says, well, this is how much we feel like building, or this is how much time we feel like taking. And product says, well, go less, go even less. In fact, that's one of the things Eric Ries says in his book is that, oh, you think a minimum viable product is this, it may be smaller than you think. And my thought is, said no user ever. I can't think of a customer who's ever used a product, any product on the planet, and said, you know what, there should be less of this. This is just, I wish there were less of this product. Too many notes, Amadeus. And I think that we forget that if we really want to create value, and if we want 5 stars out of 5 in the hearts and minds and ratings from our customers and users, then we have to build something that is 5-star quality. Now, if you're going to start with a smaller product, whether you call it an MVP, or we used to call it a beta, or we call it a minimal version 1, I'm not going to get caught up in some of that terminology, but it's got to make sense for the user and the customer. Bruce says exactly. The valuable piece is where the disagreements are. Research does help align folks, though I gotta say, even with solid research, I've seen product and engineering teams ignore results or consider it vision, something we'll get to in the future in X years. Yeah, and I disagree. It can't be vision. We can't have things our customers need in the backlog or icebox forever. There are versions of Agile, there are flavors of Agile that say, if you do not get to something in the backlog within a month, you are not agile. So you can't have something in the backlog forever. Now, sure, it could be something that is being planned as a future epic. But my question would be, we have to compare this to what users and customers really need. And I don't have it handy, but y'all know there's that graphic. Let me see if I can quickly pull up my graphic. Y'all know the graphic with the car and the motorcycle, right? The car and the motorcycle and the skateboard. Everybody know what I'm talking about? Let me open this up really quickly. This was in, let me get it open on, here we go. I've got it open in PowerPoint. Let me share my screen quickly. And we'll open up the chat as well. So let's see. If I press this button, we should be seeing it now. Let's see. Yeah. Okay, so many people have seen this graphic that was used for the MVP. And whenever I trot it out, someone says, no, you're misinterpreting it. And I go, well, okay, but take a look at what the graphic is, because even if I'm misinterpreting it, I'm misinterpreting it the way everybody else is misinterpreting it. Because very often this graphic stands on its own, and it doesn't come with the person who originally drew it explaining it. So the graphic says, and I'll describe it for people who aren't seeing the screen, it says, the MVP is not like this, and they show 4 pictures. First, a wheel, then 2 wheels, then 2 wheels and a car body, and then woohoo, the entire car. And they show faces along with that. They show sad faces until you have the entire car and the user's happy. They say the MVP is like this, and they show a skateboard, then a kick scooter, then a bicycle, then a motorcycle, and then a car. And they kind of show the user pretty unhappy until you get to the motorcycle or the car. And whenever I see this, and on my screen I've circled all of these sad faces, I say, why are we releasing anything to the customer that we suspect or know creates sad faces? Why would we bother? Why would we bother releasing something to the customer that would not get that 5 stars out of 5 rating? Why would we release something to the customer that we suspect or know does not match their needs? If they need a car, a skateboard does not match those needs. If they need a car, a kick scooter is still extremely far from those needs. People might not want your kick scooter. If you give them a kick scooter, they might not want the kick scooter. Now you've lost them. They're not going to check back when you make the bicycle or the other stuff. You lost them. How many people use an app or a company or a service and it doesn't match your needs, and you go back like 6 months later, gee, I wonder if they've fixed their crap. Very often you forget about them and you move on. So you may burn that chance. An old TV show, an old commercial in America in the 70s said, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. It was a dandruff shampoo commercial, but it's true. So remember, the MVP, if you're looking at my screen, the MVP is neither of these. It is neither building a car by doing 2 wheels and then a body and then a car. And an MVP is not giving people a kick scooter when they needed a car. An MVP, hypothetically, would be a fully functioning car that had no air conditioning, no radio, the windows don't go down, maybe there's no back seats yet, it only seats the 2 front people. That would be your car MVP, the least functioning car you could put out there. Maybe you sacrifice on safety. You want to put out a car with no airbags and things like that? Sure. That would hypothetically be the minimally viable version of a car. It has to function as a car, but just be missing additional features. Then you can say, aha, we put that car out there, and you know what? People hate it. Now, do they hate it because of what it's missing, or do they hate it because it was the wrong execution or the wrong idea? CX and UX research will tell you. But that's how we have to figure this out. Kurt says, I completed an MVP project for a company with a $2.1 billion market cap valuation, had a verbose amount of technical data to work through, and zero research was done. Yeah, I've heard stories about a very famous FANG company, who I won't name, but it's one of the FANG companies: Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google. And I heard that there are teams that just keep doing MVPs. They don't want to do research. They think research just takes too much time and money. So they just keep doing MVPs. And some teams are on their 40th MVP for the same idea. And my thought is, no. I don't even want your first MVP. I definitely don't want your 40th. So we have to really, really think critically about what is the MVP and why are we doing it? And very often we're doing it because someone read the Lean Startup, and the Lean Startup said, don't waste too much time trying to build something, and don't wait too long to launch. Get it out there. And once you get it out there, you can see what people think of it. And I say, but your CX and UX team can learn what people think of things by doing usability testing with a prototype or an early dev build before we embarrass ourselves in the public. This is all, yeah, thank you. Someone's putting up the emoji of me going, what? Siroko says, oh, wow, 40? Yes, I heard a story about 40th MVP for a company you would know that I won't name. So I think that the problem is that there's so many bad trends right now that work against good UX. Now, not just good UX because we want to do a good job at our jobs, but good customer experiences, good customer outcomes. And the problem is that we're at the point now where we've been doing MVPs for so many years that we haven't stopped to say, does this make sense? Is this really the right thing to do? Is this customer-centric? Is this giving us good satisfaction scores? Are our customers loyal? Are they happy? Do we have good app ratings? Do we have good tweets about us? Are customers leaving? We have, it's been long enough now with these MVPs that we should know that in many cases they are not working. They are a license for us to guess, and many of us got that license to guess from the Lean Startup. The Lean Startup, as the title says, was intended for startups. It was not intended for FANG. It was not intended for companies who are not startups. If you are not a startup because of how long you've been around, or how mature your product is, or how old your company is, or whatever, this isn't for you. This is a method for startups to avoid being vaporware. If you are releasing fast, even if it's embarrassing and you released too early, the idea was you were going to impress investors by showing that you released something. Again, I was there. I was in Silicon Valley when this book came out. I had a startup. I was part of the startup community. I was going to pitch events, the types of things you see on TV shows. I was pitching my startup with my memorized 2-minute thing with my slides and winning competitions. And I got a little money and the whole thing. And the whole thing back then was, just release something. Release something so that people can see that your idea exists. Don't just make promises. So our MVP was actually text message based. Before we built an app, we built a text messaging system for what my startup was. It basically, you signed up on the website, you put your phone number and some preferences in there, and then everything happened over text messaging. And then you'd return to the website once in a while for some other settings. But that's what we did originally. It was a super simple website setup and text messaging. And once that seemed to go well, we said, well, let's try building an app. And then once we built the app, it went from there. But unfortunately, it ended up going downhill in some ways. And so we ended up shutting down the company about 5 years in, but we certainly tried. But I was there to tell you that the lean startup says this, and the way it was interpreted in Silicon Valley at the time was you just got to get something out. And that way, when you get something out, you can see what people think of it, and you can show investors that you really do make software and that you're not just idea people. We're 10 years, 12 years past this now, and that's not our problem anymore. Our problem isn't now that our teams aren't impressing investors. Our problem isn't that we don't ship stuff. Of course we ship stuff. Of course we release stuff. This isn't our problem anymore. So we're solving the wrong problem very badly. Any other thoughts or comments on the lean startup and MVPs and a lot of these other things that came from the lean startup that sadly we've brought into companies of all sizes? I mean, personally, I don't even recommend the lean startup for startups. I think it's important to do proper research, especially when 90 to 95% of startups are failing, and almost all of them are using the lean startup as their Bible. I think it's time to call it time of death. Lean startup dead. If the lean startup were better, or at least better in today's modern world, more startups would be successful. It wouldn't just be some tiny little slice of people. So that's my question. That's my critical thinking question. If this approach is so great, why are our products terrible? And why are startups still failing bizarrely over 90% of the time? Even my startup failed, and I thought my idea was amazing, and I haven't seen a better idea yet for what it was. I had a problem. I had the kind of problem the Parkinson's Foundation had. I had a problem where my audience dreamed of this huge, complicated thing that they were sure that they wanted. And when I released something that wasn't that, they were like, I'm not going to use it until it does all of these other things. The end. Larry's here to say scoreboard, baby. Brian says, exactly. We need to start with a car and improve the car over time. The problem is that you can end up starting with a Corolla and end up with a sports car when what the user really needs is a truck. Fantastically said. And we would know that from our observational research. We would know what people need. Kurt says, worked on a project that had no user input. The platform that the app was released on had a review section, and those user reviews that came in after the release were brutal. Yep. Again, lean, real lean, not fake lean, not lean startup lean, not lean UX lean. Those are fake. Lean, the original lean says your customers decide value. The stakeholder doesn't decide the value. The highest paid person doesn't decide the value. They can pretend they do. The product manager can pretend they decide the value. The customer decides the value. No matter what internal people thought the value of this feature, product, service, or experience would be, the customers decide the value. Larry says, it's not Silicon Valley, it's Silicon Valley. Yeah, there were a lot of cons back there. Remember, the lean startup came in the wake of the dot-com bubble bursting. So I remember that. And as for me, the main cons I saw came from the incubator I was in. The incubator wanted us to lie to people and oof. So I just tell people now, if you are a startup, please, please don't get funding. It's really the worst thing we ever did. The worst thing we ever did was get funding. Yeah. So I recommend against it. Because once I was in the incubator and once we were trying to get funding, it was a cycle. When I would go to pitch competitions and I would pitch my thing and they would say, first of all, they wanted to know your exit strategy, which is like, when are you going to sell your company to someone? And I was like, why would I sell a successful company? And then their other question was like, and what will you do to get your next round of funding? And I would always say, I don't want a next round of funding. I want my company to be successful and profitable. My company should be able to sustain itself. I got to tell y'all, I don't say anything about this, but I don't understand these companies who keep needing $10 million, $40 million, $80 million, $200 million to stay afloat. I don't understand Series B, C, D, F. If your company is non-viable, if you cannot make a profit, especially after someone has given you millions of dollars, I kind of don't get it. I kind of don't get it. You got to rethink your business model or your product or something. You shouldn't need 80 million, 100 million to try to make a go at this. Larry says every product gets usability tested, whether it's before or after you release it. So it's up to you. Why leave it to chance? Larry's right. We can usability test it ahead of time with proper CX and UX specialists doing this right. And then, of course, give everybody time to iterate and improve on these ideas. Or we can treat our paid or trial users as crash test dummies and give them this guess and hope that they like it. We can go out there with hopes, dreams, and guesses and hope that our product is what they need. Larry says the exit strategy question isn't for your benefit, but the investors' benefit. They're wondering how and when they'll get their investment back. Yes, I know that. Hypothetically, they should get it from profits and dividends, but certainly they're thinking about the exit strategy, which I remember at the time in Silicon Valley, they were hoping to make 10x their money. And once that started becoming completely unreasonable, you weren't going to invest 10 million and get back 70 million. They started looking for like 2x. So, it all evolved, and then I walked away from all of that. Miguel says the startup mentality is to burn money, then get another round of funding, not to be sustainable in the short or medium term. That's exactly what I found 10 years ago in the startup community. It was all about burn and how fast can you burn it. And both our investor and the incubator encouraged us to burn it fast, and in many ways on things we didn't think we should have been doing. So that was all stupid. Dr. Giles says the worst UX practices I have seen professionally have been on projects that are managed by an avid fan of lean UX or the lean startup. Yes, exactly. That's why I am saying it is time to think critically about the lean startup and its evil cousin, lean UX, which just picked up where lean startup left off, while stealing other people's ideas along the way, and dump it. It doesn't make sense anymore. And again, when I ask people why, they go, oh, well, we have to do minimal viable product. We don't want to put out a larger product. And I go, is that what your customers want? Is that what customers want? Is that how you feel about products you use? It's as soon as you try to I tell people, be selfish for a moment. Think about some of the products you like. Do you want Apple to put out a minimally viable iPhone? No, you love to get your iPhone and look at it and romance with it. Now, of course, I'm all Android. I'm just saying iPhone since we know, phones have super fans. Larry says they aim for 10x returns because they're likely to fail at the 9 other companies they invested in. That was also very true. They wanted those high returns because everything was a giant mess. Yeah, for sure. For sure. While y'all put up your last comments and questions before we close the show, just a reminder that we've got Reaction Stream on Friday. Next week, we are doing 5 shows, 1 every day. So tune in for the things that you love. Monday, of course, is Think Out Loud. Tuesday is Office Hours Ask Me Anything. Wednesday, we're going to do advocating for UX by using debate techniques. Thursday, Michelle Ronson is going to do a micro lesson on note-taking strategies, and then next Friday, Reaction Stream. So we have a jam-packed January planned for you. And while you come up with a couple of questions, I'm just going to bring a quick special guest over to the camera. Because I do have a special guest here. Give me 1 second, and please put up some of your last questions and comments. Oh, Royale says, I work for a startup in the AI predictive analytics space. We've had 3 rounds of funding totaling over $100 million US, and we don't have profits yet. This is very common in Silicon Valley, I found. Yes, it is very common in Silicon Valley, and I've also found that in many cases, those companies seem to have no plan for profit. There seems to be no plan. It's like, we're just going to build and build and build and build until we come up with something that people want. And I go, where's the strategy? Where is this strategy? How much money do you have to get to have a thing that people want? I don't get it. Be right back. Special guest. Special guest. Come here, special guest. Oh, come here. I gotcha. All Our special guest today is Diana, the low ego action hero dog. Hello, Diana. How's your day? Yeah, pretty good, right? Yes, I woke you up for this, but now that you're getting some cuddles. Oh, sorry to the people listening on the audio only version. I've brought Diana the dog in, our low ego action hero mascot. So if you're going to draw her, she looks like this. Larry says minimum viable is very company centric and feature oriented, but minimum valuable is much more user centric and task oriented. And Larry, I would go one step beyond that. I would say, why are we going for minimum valuable? Who here wants minimum valuable anything? Deanna the dog does not want minimum valuable cuddles. You do not want minimum valuable pizza. We just don't want minimum valuable anything, especially where we are paying trial customers or paying full customers. We don't want minimal anything. Do you want minimally valuable education for your children? Do you want minimally valuable health care? There's nothing we want that is minimally valuable. And so I think it's a term that, sure, it's better than minimally viable, but I feel like it's a term that is still helping us make some bad decisions and go in the wrong direction. Diana, come here. Oh, I gotcha. Denise says, oh my God, Diana. Yes, please, more Diana. Hey, if you like Diana, you can find her on our Instagram account, Canetti Perfetti. CANETTIPERFETTI. It's Italian for perfect puppies. Larry says she will give you 2 hours to stop scratching her, right? Dr. Giles says minimally valuable healthcare is one of the biggest tragedies in the modern day. Yeah, exactly. I'm eating Deanna's ear accidentally. I'm just talking and your ear is in my mouth. We don't want minimally valuable anything. I don't want minimally valuable puppy. Though this is not a puppy anymore. This is a big girl. Brian says, I get sick of the cost and time argument against research and doing good user-centered design. Spending that time upfront to define and drive design is ultimately way cheaper than throwing something suboptimal every time. Totally agree, Brian. We've got to inspire our teams to do these cost-benefit analyses and say, look, how often do we have projects that are small or large disasters? How much time do we tend to spend on fixing it later? What does that cost us in customer support or customer attrition? There's got to be numbers we can associate with this. I tell people, start doing the math. Come up with numbers. The business loves numbers. The business loves to hear about money saved. Tell them how you're going to save money. That's what I say. Right, Deanna? Right, Deanna? What do you think? Maybe. Yeah, you agree. Larry says, if you need to get it out the door with a future, minimum valuable is better than minimum viable. It's not perfect, but it's feasible to achieve. Rome was not built in a day. Right. So we're obviously on a scale of stuff. 1 punch in the face is better than 2 punches in the face. Are you done here? Do you want to go? 1 punch in the face is better than 2 punches in the face. So minimum valuable is better than minimally viable. But again, I think that all of this is headed in the wrong direction. Here, I'll put you down. Thanks for dropping by. Diana, our special guest. Yeah, look, we can start saying, well, you know what? Less awful is better than super awful, but I still think that it's really important for us to start raising our standards. We are so used to getting crumbs of nothingness in our UX jobs that we're like, can we get like a little bit better than disaster? I say start asking for much better than disaster. We are business intelligence, we are risk mitigation, and if we really want to mitigate risk and save the company money, we have to stop letting these guesses and workshops and minimally viable products flying out there. Okay, Sirocco says minimum valuable makes me think of those early demo video games companies put out before releasing the whole game. Is that right? It could be. I think some of them thought of it as beta testing, but actually, Sirocco, that's probably more of beta testing, minimally valuable. And we can answer Sandra's question at the same time. Sandra says, what is the difference between minimum viable and minimum valuable? Great question. So obviously the word viable, let's get a quick dictionary definition of it so I don't say something stupid. Sorry, dog hair moment. Viable. Sorry, I'm coughing on dog hair. Give me a moment. Oh gosh, okay. Viable. Workable, feasible, practical, applicable. Here's the definition. Capable of working successfully. So for example, if your car turns on, but it doesn't go anywhere, that could be minimally viable. The car is running. Maybe if it drives, but the brakes don't work so well, that's minimally viable. So think of minimally viable as kind of just enough to be a thing. It comes from Latin vita. So that means life. So basically, viable is something that is alive. It's a thing, but it doesn't necessarily have depth. It doesn't necessarily have features. It doesn't necessarily have what people need. It is the least we could build and say, okay, this is a working, alive thing. Minimally valuable would hypothetically require us to understand how our customers or users perceive value. And then we would have to say, okay, now that we know what they think is valuable, because we want to move fast and just get something out, what's the least we could give them that they would still see as valuable? And valuable in that sense would mean it serves customers' needs. It solves their problems. It caters to their task. It improves something that they would need improved. So it can't just be minimally viable in that it exists and it functions. Minimally valuable is supposed to force us to take a look at not just what's the least we could build and put it out and say it's a thing. What's the least we can build that we still know, hopefully not just guess or suspect, that we know matches what customers need, and therefore that would be valuable to them. Sirocco and Sandra, does that help? Larry says, yes, Brian, if you don't have time to do it right the first time, what makes them think they're going to have time to do it again? Once something is delivered, it develops its own life and it's hard to change. Yes, I mentioned that a lot in my book, that why do we think that if we didn't want to put in the time to do it right the first time, we're going to put in the time later to fix it and do it right again? Very, very, very rare. And personally, one thing I'm going to be calling for very loudly in this year, 2022, is accountability. If we had accountability, I think a lot of these things would go away. Because if we had accountability, someone would go, wow, we just spent $50,000, $100,000, $300,000 on this minimum viable product and it crashed and burned. Okay, who's responsible for this? Who's responsible for this? Right now, there's no accountability. So we just keep doing guesses and we do more guesses. We put guesses on top of guesses. We make guesses based on assumptions. We run with untested hypotheses. We go into a workshop and create piles of guesses and then turn them into further guesses because there's no accountability. The moment we have accountability on our teams, the moment somebody says, I am responsible for this and I take the ultimate blame or credit for how this goes, we're going to start seeing people go, oh crap, maybe we shouldn't do these BS workshops. Maybe we shouldn't have spent 3 months guessing at that thing. Oh my God, I am now responsible for the time and money we spent and got all those angry emails about. Oh my God, I'm now responsible for the thing we spent 6 months on, that TechCrunch ripped us to shreds over. I can't wait to see that. I can't wait to see that when someone is held responsible or accountable. Sirocco says, yep, that helps. Brian says, and then you start with a stripped down MVP. Then you start adding functionality over time and the design pattern breaks because you got to kludge it all in there. It gets scrapped and you start over anyway, and that ain't cheap. Larry says, note that developers have never been held accountable for poor quality code, like marketers are held accountable for poor branding efforts. Yeah, and I've never seen UX held accountable for bad UX. Typically, if there's bad UX, people just go, like they don't even know. They just put it in the backlog with everything else. And they think, well, developers will have to work on that. And I'm like, hey, we saw that coming. So again, we're running a little late. Thanks to everybody who stayed. Remember, please subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Think of 3 people who would love this channel and please tell them about it. We're live usually 4 times a week with lots of fresh content and discussions like these. Thanks to everybody who joined in on the discussion and added some of your ideas and questions. And new people, I think Sandra might be new here. Sandra says, so UX research is the way for understanding and specify a minimum valuable product. I think so, Sandra. I think CX and UX research would be the way to help us understand what customers need and their tasks, their behaviors, their mental models, and things like that, and make sure we're building in the right direction because of our cycles of research, information architecture, interaction design, testing, and iteration. And that way, before engineering is writing code, we can make sure we have a good idea and a good execution of that idea. Remember, there's ideas and there's executions. If you're not sure, look at amusement parks. Six Flags is not the same as Disney World. Similar ideas, very different executions. Denise E says, thank you. Larry says, they don't know what good UX is. It's understandable. They wouldn't know what bad UX is. Yeah, also true for workers. People don't hire great UX workers, and then they can't tell when bad UX workers are doing bad work. So just a reminder, please do subscribe here on the YouTube channel. Join in the live streams, or everything's always archived in the playlists. You can watch everything later if you'd like, or send it to friends. Turn it into watch parties at your job. And if you have any follow-up questions, you're always welcome to contact me personally or leave a comment in the YouTube comments. And any questions that you might have about the stream are answered on deltacx.com/links. What's our calendar of events? How do you get coaching from me? How do you learn Axure from me? Check out the new Axure playlist on the YouTube channel where I've got 13 hours of Axure videos. So just poke around the YouTube channel and I'm sure you'll find something that's right for you. So I'm going to play us out of here. There's no show tomorrow, but hopefully I'll see everybody Friday for the always wacky reaction stream. Deb reacts to wacky things that you've sent in. Thanks again, everybody. Get away from lean startup, lean UX, and MVPs, and I'll see you soon. Customer centricity as business intelligence. Visit deltacx.com to learn why we are